And I'm going to turn it over to Sharon to walk us through what we're doing this morning.
So good morning. So first of all, I need to make sure that everybody signs in, whoever's in this room. We need you to sign in to one of the two signature pages. There's one up here and there's one right there. This is for the acceptance of the preliminary engineering report that was presented by Lockmuller to the commissioners. It is available on our tippecanoecounty.in.gov website. You can see it at any time you would like. And we have to have a resolution that says that the commissioners have accepted this PER, and the second resolution is for the signatories of the RSD, which for the time being will be the commissioners. And Mike is the engineer from Lockmuller, if you'd like anything to say. Are you good?
Unless we have questions, okay. All right, and I see we have a couple gentlemen here, so we'll allow for some public comment. Morning.
Oh, it's there you go. Thank you.
Can you go to the microphone, please?
Of course. It's on.
Oops.
It was.
Oh, it's ready. Now it's on. Okay. Good morning. My name is John DeLong. I'm out in Colburn. This is a map here of Washington Township is in the red, and the proposed RSD is in the yellow. And I just highlight that to you because one of the points I'd like to make this morning is that the gerrymandering of this district to include America's Buck Creek and Colburn, and including all of the other area out there, results in a very unfair situation. The engineers have grouped the poor people in Colburn in particular, but Americas and Buck Creek, and excluded all the rich communities. And I pointed out there's Wentworth, there's Ben Liddell, there's Deer Run, there's the Washington Township trustees property. These are all excluded from this area. So with that, I have some remarks here and then I can answer any questions. My point is we need to focus on the impact of this proposed project on the people of our community. I represent 141 residents of Americas, Buck Creek, and Colburn who signed a petition asking IDEM to reject the RSD, and I'd like to submit that for the public record. That was submitted to IDEM last week at the public hearing. We haven't heard back from IDEM yet whether they've approved the RSD. All of these residents that we talked to are concerned about pollution of our streams and rivers, but they're also concerned that the RSD and the PER are not cost-effective or fair. The PER, in our opinion, is gold-plated and too expensive. And two, it is unfair to the citizens captured in the RSD, and I'll explain why. Just as a mortgage lender calculates the loan amount the homeowner can reasonably bear, we must be concerned with the financial burden we place on citizens, and particularly our poorer citizens. Colburn has a median household income of approximately $40,000. To add on a sewer tax of between $800 and $1,400 per year is just inconceivable. Like a mortgage that is too big, they will lose their house. Lockmuller is proposing a gold-plated project. I term it a Taj Mahal. But reasonable alternatives exist, and I will submit for the public record 2 examples of successful wastewater treatment projects built and installed by local Indiana engineers out of Batesville that are cost-effective. These installed plants are right now achieving monthly sewer rates inclusive of debt service of between $30 and $40 a month per household versus Lockmuller's estimate of $64 to $120 per month. So I suggest that that should be our bogey. We estimate savings of at least $2 million can be achieved by 1, eliminating transportation costs. We don't believe the PER has effectively compared individual package plants in each of these communities with this idea of spending $1 million just on the transportation of waste across the fields to a centralized place, initially Americas, and now I gather it's Buck Creek. 2, reducing engineering design charges. And 3, eliminating this resident project representative. Why would you pay an engineer and then pay another engineer half as much again to oversee the first engineer? The wastewater treatment plants are termed package plants as they are standardized installations that reduce or eliminate custom engineering and minimize operating expenses. I call these plug and play, and you can see them on YouTube or talk to engineers about them. We've seen them installed in trailer parks here in Lafayette. They're used in other small isolated rural communities. They're installed all over the country. In addition to the concern of high costs, I want to highlight the unfairness of this RSD and the PER. As you can see from my overlay of the RSD on the map of Washington Township, and I'd like to submit this for the public record as well, the RSD excludes all the wealthy developments and pools the poorer regions of the township. And 2, existing septic systems on larger lots out away from the towns in that broad area between the towns are included in the RSD. And under Indiana law, it's required that a sewer system in an RSD has to join the RSD. Initially, there's a 10-year exemption if the initial project was approved. The vast majority of these projects were never permitted or approved because they were built long before these public health concerns started. So just as an example, our farmers live out there on 50 acres. They got a septic system that works just fine, and they're within that orange district. They're going to have to pay these taxes. In the best case, it's going to be 10 years. In the worst case, there's no initial permitting on that facility, so they're going to pay these taxes as soon as you start this project up. I don't see how that's fair. The RSD excludes all the wealthy developments and pools the poorer regions. Even though these RSDs, the RSD will require joining the sewer system, even though these systems are working fine and release no pollution. For those of us who think on a per acre or per head of livestock or per household basis, I have one thought experiment for you. Simply calculate the total cost of this project. As put out right now, it's $12.7 million, and divide that by 276 households, which is what the engineering proposal estimates are the number of households. 12.7 million divided by 276 is $45,000. That's the debt and expense that you are going to allocate with this project onto each household. For the people of Colburn, with houses valued at an average of $110,000, this is unconscionable. It just doesn't work. And there are alternatives. So I'm going to end by quoting Commissioner Brown from 2014 and urge you to come up with new and innovative ways to control the costs of providing necessary government services and to do so with more transparency and communication. That's from an interview you did with the Journal and Courier back in 2014. And I must say, I respect those principles. We can't afford a Taj Mahal in Washington Township, and we must be fair to our citizens. So I hope that you'll reconsider this. I hope that you'll involve other engineering firms with a stronger focus on cost effectiveness. And I hope you'll look at these package plants very hard. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. DeLong. I do have a couple questions for you. What you're suggesting is that we, to provide relief to folks who are having issues in this area, that we continue with the project, but we look at something that's more cost effective. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you're
I
in
don't
support of
believe
the project in a whole. It's just the cost of it that
I'm in support of the intent. So the
Okay.
Clean Water Act gives you very little leeway with what to do. But I will mention one aspect of this. In September of 2020, the EPA issued a notice of proposed rulemaking to do what are called financial assessments. And they've changed the way they do financial assessments. And the financial assessments tie into what the state will then determine are the appropriate water quality standards for the waterways near those communities. So IDEM is currently looking at their water quality standards in light of this new EPA guidance. And in a place like Colburn, they will take that into account. Now, I've presented before that Colburn's effluent into the Sugar Creek was measured at, I think it was 576 coliform forming units. That's a medium level of pollution. But until 2008, that was below the level at which Indiana would close its public beaches. So it was only in 2008 that Indiana asked the EPA and the EPA consented to lower that CFU number to, I think it's 235 now. But my family's been in this area since 1848. I've gone back to everybody I can talk to, and everybody's swum in that creek, drunk out of those wells, and lived in that area without any incidents. I talked with Mr. Ron Knowles. He confirmed that there's no wells that have been impacted. There's no broad health concerns out there. I'm not disputing that we need to control the push of gray water into the creek. We need to do something, but we can do it for very much less money than this Lockmuller proposal. And we have examples of that.
That's what I was going to ask. Where are those two? I think you said there were 2 plants.
Yeah, there are 2.
One's
One's in Mifflin, Ohio, and the other's in Glenford, I think is the name, Ohio. I have the engineering documents here, the bids and the operating costs. I'll submit those for the public record.
Okay, that'd be
And I
great.
have a contact at the folks are named Earth Tech Engineering. They're located over in Batesville, Indiana, and the PE is Kevin Chafee. And I'll give you his contact information.
And then, do you happen to know how many residents those 2 districts serve?
I know this. No, I know the size of the plant, and the size of the plant is generally sized on 100 gallons a day per person. So the size of the Mifflin plant was approximately 30,000 gallons per day. So that's about 300 people, or it's sized for 300 people. And the Glenford plant was sized at 35,000 gallons per day. So these are approximately the same size as you would use in Colburn or Buck Creek, both of which have approximately 65 households and very rough 300 people per populations. So these are the same size.
Okay. And then you had mentioned that in regard to you thought a package plant should be done at each of those 3 communities instead of 1.
Correct.
Did you happen to see in the plan the cost of doing that?
Yes, I did.
Yes, compared to
2.6 to 2.9 million dollars, and we don't find any basis for that. I don't mean any disrespect to Lockmuller, and I've only met Mike just briefly and didn't get a chance to talk with him. And I'd hope to talk with you all as well. So I'm looking forward to doing that. But this is 3 times what we see other people doing this at. And I have the example, for example, Stockwell. Stockwell is built at, I think it's a 70,000 gallon per day plant, if I'm not mistaken. They're utilizing 18,000 gallons per day. And yet they are able to maintain their sewer charges at $60 a month. And they financed this. Their debt and interest payment is in there. They financed it at much higher rates than currently under the wastewater fund that you've notified us that you hope to use. Interest rates on that fund are 2%. So I just don't understand why a plant that would be 1/3 of the size of that Stockwell plant, or half the size, I guess, if we use that 30,000 gallons per day, can't be operated for significantly less. There's also one other place I'll point you to is there's a Indiana, I think it's called the Regulated Utilities. I can get you the website. They provide a public database of what the charges are per month for regulated utilities, including wastewater. And from there, I've seen that there are many plants that charge $30 to $40 per month. So I don't see why we can't hit that bogey. And that certainly, we're talking about a third. At $30, we're talking about 1/4 of the high end of Lockmuller's estimate. And I believe we really ought to try to get that, particularly for Colburn. If you don't do that, then what I suggest is that you bring everybody in the Washington Township into this. If you really argue that, you can't let any pollution go out, then why is Ben Liddell excluded? Why is Wentworth excluded? Why is Deer Run excluded? You have a $440,000 home. There are 9 of them out there. That's the average. You have 9 of them out there that are just sitting on the border of this.
Because most of those have space to do a second septic system. if
So does
necessary.
everybody who lives in the district that you see there in yellow, with the exclusion of
Those three
of
communities.
several, well, only small segments of that community. I live in that community. My 2 people here with me live in that community. One's got 7 acres, one's got 9 acres. I got 200.
It just, yeah, it depends on, health department regulations and so on and so forth. So, okay, all right, thank you very much.
I do
Thank you.
have just, if you don't mind, just a couple of quick comments. I don't disagree with you, Mr. DeLong, that there is a sweet spot, if you will, or a bogey when it comes to the monthly cost, and 65 to 100 plus is a lot of money for a lot of people. We got involved in this a long time ago now. It seems like because of a complaint, and we were left with the choice at that point in time, which was to kick the can down the road to another group of commissioners at some point in time in the future and hope that nothing bad happened in any of those communities. Obviously, Transitville, as it was originally referred
Yes,
to on the maps,
I know it that way.
when that was platted to begin with, modern sewage septic systems were not part of normal everyday life. Many of those lots, specifically in Buck Creek where this started, are not large enough to sustain a second, or in some cases, maybe they already have a second and are going to be working towards the third. So again, transparency is important. I think most people agree that we need to do something. The magic is deciding what that something is going to be, and we have started down through that process. I can assure you, having been involved in this from day one, you use the term gerrymandering so that rich people were not included. As Commissioner Murtaugh said, it was a practical matter when you're looking at Ben Liddell, and Ben Liddell was kind of an afterthought to us initially, because we were looking at those 3 individual communities. And it was the size of their lots and the age of their systems. And the fact that in many cases, we actually had records. If you look at Buck Creek, Colburn, Americus, I wouldn't be able to put a percentage on what we have records for, actual health department records, but it wouldn't surprise me if we have less than half on file. So we know at some point in time, those folks are going to have an issue. So we're looking at the future. The map as it sits right now may have been just as simple as just including areas in between, knowing that you were going to have transport issues between the 3. Certainly, as Commissioner Murtaugh said earlier, we did look at one of the things that we had Lockmuir Group look at was, what does it look like if we do a package plant, or a simpler plant at each one of those locations? And I agree, we probably, prioritization of the needs is important too, because there are the needs in Buck Creek right now are significant. And at some point in time, the complaint that we have about the water that's flowing into the creek there, and through the little burg of Buck Creek is going to be, that current drain is going to be dug up or going to be capped, and it's going to leave some people in a really bad situation. So again, we don't want to kick the can down the road to somebody else, but we should always be working to do a better job in driving those costs very, very low. Right now, we don't know for certain where the funding is going to come from. That is it going to be grant funding? Is it going to be a loan? Are there other dollars through other programs that are available to us? But quite frankly, our mission is to get that cost down as low as we can for those homeowners. So,
May I respond to that comment?
Sure.
Just with a couple of points. One is that, as I mentioned, the EPA in this 2020 Notice of Public Regulation is going to will affect the establishment of water quality standards for Sugar Creek. And IDEM is well aware of the burden of livestock who are producing 100,000 tons of manure every year versus Colburn residents who are producing 40, just to make it dramatic. But so I expect that EPA and IDEM will come out with revised water quality standards here in the near future. And that may impact the type of plant, the types of decisions, the type of scheduling and priority that you put on these projects. So the fact that Buck Creek has a serious concern right now may be a better argument for putting a small plant in Buck Creek and then waiting on Colburn to see what happens, or waiting. Americus, as you know, has significant commercial interests, and that complicates the calculation of, you know, who's paying what. So we don't want Colburn residents subsidizing businesses down in Americus, for example. So there's reasons to differentiate this, I suggest. The second point I wanted to make is, if I can leave in your head that the estimate for a package plant for this 30,000 gallons per day is about $850,000. That's installed, completed, electrical, buildings, a yard to go in. These are fiberglass tanks that last forever. They're put on 1/8 of an acre, maybe 1/4 of an acre. It's a simple plug and play. They put these on small, you can see on YouTube, they put these on small high schools out in the mesas in Arizona. You know, any place that's far away from a central grid, you can do this. So I suggest that these are the way to go. I also suggest that when you're bidding this kind of thing, you know, engineers always gold plate things, and they do it because they want to protect themselves, obviously, when there's uncertainty. So I understand it, but you're always going to get the best price when you put competition in the mix. Whether I'm, you know, selling cattle or selling corn or whatever, I'm always trying to bid it. So I suggest that you get people in here who can bid it, and that we get a dialogue going with alternatives to what otherwise looks to us. And I appreciate your statement about government transparency, but this thing looks like it was steamrolled. And the problem is, back in June 16, 2020, when we had a public hearing on this, basically we were told this is coming and you can't do anything about it. And then we haven't seen any elected officials out in Colburn since that time. There have been no additional communications back from the commissioners to the town. The only thing we saw was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now, I guess we got a letter from IDEM saying there's a public hearing. And then I had to go and ask Ms. Hutchison for all the documents because they weren't posted on the website. And in fact, the petition that I think you signed back in July of 2020, basically 30 days after the public hearing was made, which on the advice of your lawyer was correct, that you had to wait 30 days per the law. But that was never posted on the website. It was put in the public library during a COVID epidemic, and you had to file a government records request to get to that. Nobody said it was coming at the public hearing. So that's the kind of, I don't mean to be accusatory, but I want to feed back to you that the citizens are feeling put upon, or it's more left out, in the sense that we don't know what's happening. And then when we do find out what's happening, for example, this meeting was only posted, no notice was sent out to the freeholders. This notice was posted on the county website. And fortunate it was that I saw it. And then, you know, we've thrown all this together in 2 weeks. So if I can get 141 residents of that area in 2 weeks of walking around door to door, I've met every resident in the area at this point, or a representative of every household in the area at this point. I think we need to up our transparency and build goodwill. And you know, I'll make another pitch, just because there are 2 dilapidated buildings. One's my great-grandfather's house, is in Colburn. We brought this to your attention in 2018. A little kid fell through from the 2nd floor to the 1st floor 2 weeks ago, and we called. The county health department has sent out, or the county building inspector has sent out 8 building inspectors between 2018 and today, and we still haven't got that house torn down. And there's another one that should be torn down as well. Our gazebo at our little town community center there was torn down. It hasn't been built up, but the Washington Township trustee has $670,000 to spend. Our basketball court is not resurfaced. Our meeting board, where everybody exchanges information out there, was torn down, blew down, and has not been. So we're coming from a little small place that, you know, has got soul. My family's been there literally since 1848, but we need some help from the county commissioners. We need some attention, and we very much look forward to moving forward, but in a cost-effective and a fair and equitable manner. The final point, because it ran through my head here, and I'm sorry for my my lack of organization, but discontinuous regional sewer districts are allowable under Indiana state law. So you could establish a regional sewer district for all of those lots that you described that are under whatever your minimum is, 1 acre or 2 acres, and exclude people like all of us who have larger lots and who have the opportunity to put in functioning septic systems. And then you can size the plant smaller, you can reduce the costs, and you can allocate it just to those people who need an additional treatment of their waste before it goes into the ag tile or the sewer overflows.
I just have a couple comments. First of all, I was not aware of any unsafe structures in Colburn, and so those have been submitted to the building commission.
They were submitted in 2018. They were, D. Pattengale says he talked with you, but I can't attest to that. But
The last one we had was when Commissioner Knockle was here, and we got that one taken care of, but we can look into that.
okay, well, I think the building commissioner has told me that she'll fast track this onto your agenda to get taken care of.
Okay.
And I've forgotten the name of the woman I talked to there, but she was very responsive, and so we appreciate that.
And then were you at the public hearing that we held?
No, I was not. I've listened to the transcript. I've listened to the tape and I've reviewed the transcript.
But we did talk about the fact that what was going to be on file at the library, and that document was the original study, which was a lengthy document, and we
Yes.
stated that it would be on record there so that people could look at it, and that was because of the length of it. But it was also available online. I referenced it myself numerous times during the course of that.
It may have been online. It was not on the county commissioner's website. So I don't know
was on
where
the
it was
county
online.
page. I can't tell you that it was on our direct website. I mean, on our page within our website, but it was on our website.
Okay,
Yeah.
and
I think actually it was
I
on
have
the
a lot of,
homepage.
I have a lot of sympathy for, I am not a computer
And
person.
that's why we put it
So-
on, we put it in a different location so
And-
that people would have access.
And
to
Ms.
it.
Hutchinson recently moved it to the front of that page per my request or per my complaint, really, that it wasn't easy to find, and that was much appreciated. And I commend you for that, and I encourage you to do that in the future, because as
Certainly.
people are interested in this, having a central button to
Exactly.
push makes it
Yep.
very easy for us old
So we
guys.
do that. Yep.
I want to actually, you mentioned the June 16th meeting, because the minutes of that meeting, which were attached to your petition to IDEM, stated, and this is the penultimate page, and I'll submit this to the record as well. It said, at this point, the commissioners are looking to roll all of the capital costs into one or more of these types of state and federal funding, which would cover all the costs of the capital project. So there will be no additional cost to the citizen, only the monthly service fee. Well, the monthly service fee under the previous Lockmuller recommendation was $133,000 a month, which I think is about $54 a month to the 276 households. I'm doing this out of the top of my head, but I don't, but then you released a note that said you were getting water and sewer fund loan. And so I presume that debt service would then be passed through to the RSD. So I'm not clear, it's not clear from your public statement at the public hearing or your subsequent description of what kind of funding you were going to get, whether debt service was going to be a part of this, but debt service is a big chunk of change.
Right, unless we can get some sort of forgivable grant that, the debt service would definitely have to be part of that.
Well, then we're looking at, I think I calculated on $1 million for the 65 residents of Colburn. If you just built $1 million plant and debt finance that, you're talking about $188 a month at 2% interest rate.
Yeah. And then we don't know too, like on those lower rates you talked about, those folks may have been charged a hookup fee too, there's a lot of different variables there. We
Yep,
can certainly look
There
into
is.
that.
And all I'm really interested in, of course, is total cost.
Yeah.
I don't care where you allocate it. It's a tax, whatever you do. These folks are currently operating septic tanks that overflow into the creek. The levels of that creek were acceptable until 2008. Now they're not. Now we're talking about hitting them with $65 to $120 a month. That's at the high end, $1,400 a year on a household income of $40,000 a year. That's 2.5% right there on wastewater, and you're not providing water or sewer. I've got a place here on Chauncey Street that I pay $52 a month for water, sewer, and trash pickup. We gotta find a way, and I think you need additional input from experts to find a way to reduce these costs to something appropriate.
This is the last thing that I'll say, and Sharon may actually have the dates. I do want you to know, Mr. DeLong, that we did hold, I believe, at least 2 other meetings in Buck Creek. One that I'm absolutely sure of, and possibly one even before that. So we have worked really, really hard on this and worked hard on getting a lot of people involved. In fact, I recall that we took a great deal, just copious notes from the official public meeting last June, because we had a lot of questions we couldn't answer at that time. And our staff spent an enormous amount of time immediately after that meeting going over the minutes of the meeting and answering all those questions. And I believe, Sharon, those were then sent out or posted somewhere after the meeting?
They were mailed to all the people that attended the meeting, the public meeting.
Okay.
And all those answers were addressed and mailed out to them.
Just for clarification, they were sent out to the people who asked the questions. I've reviewed those, and I appreciate the county's efforts to answer those questions. A lot of the answers were, we don't know. So I would argue that, I know more about Indiana law at this point from having spent the last 2 weeks delving into it than they really told people, because one of the main concerns was for people who had the larger lots, would they be required to set up? And there was a citation to the Indiana code, and we've deciphered that for everybody and sent that around. So I appreciate the extra communication. I encourage you to keep doing it. I think the meetings that you're talking about, the public meetings, were task force meetings. There were at least 3 of those. No resident of Colburn was at those meetings. One of them was invited. D. Pattengale is his name, Danny Pattengale, former county employee for 30 plus years. But he never attended those meetings and didn't really understand what was happening. So I think in the future, if you reach out to the town representatives or area representatives, if you don't get one, let's make sure that someone is found and put in there, because otherwise we end up in this situation where it's most unfortunate to have the town, 141 people have signed this petition saying, stop this. That's not a negligible number of people out of a total population of the district. Well, in the district itself, I think we're probably talking less than 1,000 people. It's going to be much less than that, because all of Washington Township is, I think, 2,600 people. So 15% of the land area, I really don't know how many people are in that RSD. 267 households, multiply that times 3 maybe. I really don't know, but we have a substantial, over 10%, 15% of the people in that RSD have said no, probably significantly more. And IDEM has heard that. You've now heard that. To characterize this to IDEM as having broad community support, it does not. I've been out and talked to everybody. My buddies here helped me as well. We've had we've taken a lot of time and effort on this, and I think we don't stand to gain anything from this. These guys maybe do. I don't have a house there right now that I'm renting a place. I don't have a house that I'm putting septic in. So I'm here because my great-grandfather was the town doctor. My grandfather and great-uncle lived out there. My father grew up out there and mowed the cemetery. They're all buried in that cemetery. My grandfather was George DeLong. He was on the county council for 22 years, was president for 10 years. And he hated this kind of thing when people spent money and didn't take care of the locals and didn't realize who's out there struggling to get by on 2 Social Security checks and then getting a utility bill like this that just is overwhelming. So
this may sound like a roundabout question, and Zach, I know you're sitting back there. We know there's gray water run through a lot of filled tile coming through some of these towns. I know we know We had it in some places. Is there any rules or regulations to where that could eventually be capped? And then unfortunately, these little towns would be stuck with no sewage system? I mean, I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here on this part, but I mean, and I understand if the citizens are opposed to this, and I know we want to keep costs low and this and that and everything else, but if we're to the point to where gray water is a no-no, no matter where it's coming from,
Right.
would
So-
these little towns be, I mean, it could literally shut the little towns.
Yeah, so Zach, for the record, Zach Beasley, Tippecanoe County Surveyor. To respond back to Commissioner Byers' question, as the county surveyor, I have no jurisdictional authority by statute over gray water or any
Okay.
wastewater, okay? However, with that being said, if during routine maintenance of county tiles, county regulated tiles, we find a private tile discharging gray water into the system, I'm required as a county surveyor and MS4 coordinator for the county to report that to the health department. Then the health department will track it to wherever it goes. That's the extent of my jurisdictional authority. Now, the other questions that you asked, that may lead to some of that, but I can't answer that specifically. But for the
That was a
record,
very
that's-
broad question, I
that's my-
understand.
Yeah. If myself or my staff find that type of substance in a county tile, I'm required by law to report it to the health department. That is the process.
And then is the health department then required to report it to IDEM?
Yes, and try to track down the source of it.
And that's what triggered the,
Yes.
what is it called from IDEM? Is it an order or basically we're under some sort of,
You're referring to the situation we had in Buck Creek?
exactly.
Yes. So two things happened in the situation in Buck Creek. We did find gray water and human waste. I did report it to the health department. The residents of Buck Creek also reported it to IDEM. And so, yeah, so it went to IDEM from two different directions, from the local government, i.e. our health department, and the citizenry of Buck Creek. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it's basically a situation where, I understand what you're saying, Mr. Long. A lot of people don't want this. And if it was just that simple, you don't want it, then we move
No.
on. But we are under this issue of.
But I'd like to
where
clarify,
IDEM is
I
whatever.
started off by saying that, when we petitioned these 141 people, they said they didn't want this project as structured. They are all concerned, and literally, without exception, the people I've talked to are all concerned with the discharge into the rivers and streams.
Okay.
So they want clean water. They just want it done cost effectively, and they want it done in a way that's fair. Those are the two things. As a
think that's-
final note, to Mr. Byers, Commissioner Byers' question, the Clean Water Act, and I can't quote the code specific, the section, but it makes explicit that the Clean Water Act regulations will be moderated to not impose excessive economic hardship on people. So IDEM would work with the community, and while they might shut down something, they would make some adjustments. And this is what that September notice of proposed rulemaking is trying to do, is to reflect that water quality standards have been used in the past to injure certain communities or to impose excessive economic hardship on certain communities. So they're trying to ensure that there's more flexibility in the way their code is implemented.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what they come out with, because I know right now cattle are not allowed in streams or should not be allowed in streams and creeks, and fences should be
Well,
keeping them out. So,
Come visit me in
I know.
Sugar Creek watershed, because I own a half a mile of it, and everybody upstream, well, not everybody, but
Right.
several people upstream of me are running cattle in the watershed.
that's part of the rules they're trying to push.
And there's, 7,000 gallons of hog manure going on to every tillable acre in Carroll County, which is, 12 square miles of watershed that goes into Sugar Creek. So there's a lot of manure being spread around. And that number I gave you earlier, 40 tons for all of the residents of Colburn. That's not per person. That's all the residents of Colburn are putting 40 tons into septic tanks. They put it into septic tanks. 100,000 tons are being put on the ground
Well,
by
it's
the
knifed
farmers.
in.
I'm sorry?
It's knifed in. They're
Yeah,
under IDM
it's
rules,
knifed
so
in.
it's knifed in. It's not poured on the ground, it's in
No,
the ground.
it's knifed in to
Right.
ground that then is tiled and comes straight to Sugar Creek. And I'm not, look, I've got an interest in hogs, so I'll put all the hog manure I can onto ground. And I'd even recommend that you look at putting human waste on the ground. I mean, you do, Lafayette put some of their human waste out there on 3%, I think, of the ground in the township. So it's done, and it should be done. One of the initial bumper stickers we thought of coming up is, crap local, keep it local. Because these septic tanks should be pumped out. We'll treat it, we'll test it, make sure, it's clean, but then use it on the ground. I got 50 acres of trees we planted out there. We're very concerned about erosion, but we're also, we could use it to feed the trees. And it is legal to put on, as you know, on row crop, on ground for row crops, so.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Is there
you.
anyone else who'd like to speak? Yes.
Good morning. My name is Dale Nicholson. I'm from out the Colburn area, and if I come across as irate, it's because I am. But you gentlemen will be able to see past that. And what I'd really like to do is, view these comments. Put yourself in my shoes. See this as if you were a resident of Colburn.
Yeah, I'm sorry, can you state your address for the record?
6651 North, 1000 East. Sugar Creek runs right through my yard. The neighborhood kids spend a good chunk of the summer playing in it. I would like it clean also. And, I guess my first question is, how in the world are we supposed to even know about this hearing? It's on the website, but it's kind of like me. If I was going to have a party and I posted the invitation on my refrigerator and expected my neighbors to all be able to come, it appears to us in Colburn as if this whole project, there's a lot going on with no information, no interaction with the residents. I was invited to, I received a questionnaire. Do I have good water, sewer drainage? And I answered that, and I was invited to a meeting a year ago, and I attended that. That's all I know about this, other than the IDM meeting, which we had, 2 weeks notice. It turns out we were supposed to have 180 days notice for public comment, and we got 2 weeks because nobody knew about it. How can this project take place with so little interaction from the residents? None of the people voting to do this project will live in the district or bear the cost. How is that okay? There are 276 properties in the district, and you only have septic information on 109 of them. 2 have specifically identified problems. I work in manufacturing, and say I have 276 machines in my plant, and some of them aren't working right. Everybody knows it. And if I tell my employer that I know something about 109 of them, 2 are definitely broken, and I don't know anything about the remaining 167, and then I ask for $13 million to just replace all of them, how do you think that would go over? On a little more personal level, say I know my car needs a brake job. That's important, has to be done. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrap all of the cars in all of my entire neighborhood, and then replace them with new cars, and then make my neighbors pay the bill. That's exactly what we're proposing to do here. How can we fix a problem without even defining what it is? And we all know there is gray water going into the creeks. We know that. We know we have to fix it. But I guess as I look at the engineering study, the actual numbers that we're working, we just don't know who or, which residences or what we're actually trying to fix. So I guess one of the things that I propose is that we step back and define the problem. I mean, that's what I have to, I'm an engineer also. And nothing, I won't take it personally, the engineer comments. I'm an engineer, and that's the very first thing I have to do is define the problem that I'm trying to solve first. And I propose we do that here and then proceed to step 2 to actually fix that problem. I am one of the people who, I'm outside of Colburn, just outside of Colburn. Like John said, I've got 7 acres. I have a working septic system. I paid for a house with a working functional septic system. I don't want to pay again. One of my friends in Buck Creek, he had asked the question at the last hearing. I just put, many thousands of dollars into a new septic system because I knew it was going to be a problem. He doesn't want to pay again. Lockmuller has every incentive to make this project as big as possible. They're engineers. That's how that works. The residents who will bear the cost have every incentive to make it as small as possible. Why do we need to install a new sewage system for residences that already have septic tanks? And I guess I wondered that just as I looked at the study and say, yeah, as John mentioned, my understanding is most, if not all, of the houses in Colburn, they have septic tanks. And it's just the gray water, it's leaving those septic tanks, it's going to the creek. So why would you start your when you're looking at your local plant estimate, why would you start by tearing those all out and putting a complete new system in every single residence in the community? I just think that's the wrong place to start. It needs to be smaller than that. I mentioned earlier, we should have had 180 days for public comment before the IDEM hearing. Instead, we had 2 weeks because nobody knew about it until IDEM sent out the letter. During that 2 weeks, we were able to circulate a petition among some of our residents asking IDEM to reject the county petition in favor of a more cost-effective alternative. And again, I'll reiterate that we know there's a problem and we do want it fixed. We want it done cost-effectively. Nearly every household that we visited signed the petition. We just, in the short time, we simply didn't have enough time to go to all of the households. And then you saw after the IDEM meeting last week, there was a line. I placed a blank petition out on the table on the way out, and there was a line to sign that. We got several more signatures that evening. If more than 50% of the residents had signed it, IDEM would have had grounds to reject the county's petition. So if we can go back out and get a majority of residents to sign, will you stop what you're doing and look at less expensive alternatives? Or are you comfortable going forward with something that is legal but not ethical? As was already mentioned, the median income in Colburn is around $40,000. Of course, that's median. That means a lot of people are making more and a lot of people are making less. And if just the debt load, $9 million spread across 276 households, that's $33,000 per household. That doesn't sound reasonable to me. And at the hearing last year, it was put across to us that we hope to cover this with a grant. I noticed that was not we will cover it with a grant. There is money available. It's just we hope to. Will you postpone this project until there is a grant to cover those capital costs? Those are some questions that I have. And I appreciate the back and forth between you and John. He does, and the people, all that I have talked to and we've talked to together, he does represent the sentiments of our community. We hope that there are a lot simpler ways to do this, and we hope that we can go that direction instead of getting the Taj Mahal and us paying for it. Thank you.
I just have a broad question, and thank you for you guys. Obviously, you have a passion for Little Colburn and things like that and such. Do you see potentially or non-potentially, if a sewage system was put in, potential growth that could come to this little town, potentially increase value of homes, potentially things like that? I mean, I'm just curious, or you know,
Nobody,
if you have larger lots around, okay, is now a DeLong subdivision coming in because we now have sewage? I mean, I'm just throwing
Yeah,
wild ideas out.
we
I'm
don't
just
want to
curious.
pay for that. If somebody wants to put in a subdivision, I would like for the developers to pay for that.
That's why I'm just
Well,
curious.
They would be paying for that.
You know, people don't move to Colburn. Well, John was saying, I'm the first person he met who's moved to Colburn, but I'm actually just outside of Colburn. They're tiny little lots. That's not going to change. The train blasts its horn next to all our houses, and I'm able to sleep through that. Basically, every time a train goes by, it reminds me that somebody's making something or somebody's buying something. So I see that as a good thing. It sure would be nice if we didn't have that right there. So you don't move to Colburn if you don't have to. If you can afford a nice lot without a train blaring, you move someplace else. Out back to, the lands further out. Well, I moved to my lot because I do have 7 absolutely gorgeous acres surrounded by, by John's land and Terry's land. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. As I've been meeting my neighbors, I think these are pretty neat people. But if somebody is going to develop out there, either they're going to put a lot in, they're going to build on a lot that has room for their own septic system, or if a subdivision is going to go in, the developers can put in a package plant or something like that. Or I don't know how it works from there on out, but I do see eventual growth, but I don't want to pay for it.
Thank you.
I'd like to respond to Commissioner Byers' good question. I think it's a good one because we have a lot of land out there and have thought about what the opportunities are. I think what we see right now is demand for sort of hobby farms. So these are 2 to 5 acres, even 10-acre lots, $400,000 sort of minimum. People who just want to be out in the country. Developers will build 10-acre assessments like they have with Deer Run or Wentworth. Those are also 10 house lots, divisions, sufficient to cover the infrastructure investments that are required and amortize that over each of the houses, and then $400,000. Those people, remember, those are $400,000 an average house versus in Colburn, $110,000. One of the things that I started out thinking about was that when I first talked with Commissioner Murtaugh last year, just before the public hearing, was I was suggesting that you could put a fund together and actually purchase up some of these lots as they become available. These are mostly older people who are living out there. At one time, we had a street, it was Church Street or Virginia Street, that had 10 or 11 widows on it. It was just, one of those things that happens. Now, if the county were to come in and purchase those lots, then all of a sudden you consolidate them with other lots in the community, and now you've got lots that can handle septic or that are just nicer. Has anybody moved into Colburn? Not in my lifetime, except for Dale. Terry actually moved in my lifetime, but
He's outside.
he's on the fringes. I think the answer to your question is, I don't see the imposition of a tax, which this sewer tax is. It's a tax for a service, but it's still a tax. That tax is between $33,000 and $45,000 per house. I don't know how that contributes to house values at all. These house values right now, they get sewer for free. And now you want to put $1,000, $1,400 a year more on them. And you think that's going to increase house values? No, it's just not. My training is as an economist. I've heard that from Mr. Knowles, told that to me. I discussed it with Mr. Murtaugh before. I just don't think, it's not going to happen.
Well, and I'll tell a little story about Stockwell. I mean, I, in a previous life did mortgage lending, and, Stockwell, before their sewer district went in, got to a point where you couldn't do any lending there because their septics were failing. Luckily we're not to that point yet, but, obviously without the ability to get a loan on the property values plummeted. And they have rebounded significantly. And now you do see significant increases in property values within Stockwell and Clarks Hill now because of that,
I would
so.
push back just slightly on the idea that it's because of that, but Stockwell
well, I don't know what
and
else it would
Stockwell
have
and Romney
been,
are,
but-
well, they're both on the south end of Lafayette. There's clearly been a huge amount of growth between Lafayette and Indianapolis, so they're fortuitously located, whereas where we are out there between Delphi and Lafayette
Along the Hoosier Heartland. I mean, yeah.
is maybe many, many, many years down the road to development. But I don't dispute that, look, anything that the government does efficiently, thoughtfully, carefully, in concert with the citizens can yield value. And I think, Mitch Daniels has proven, Governor Holcomb has proven that you can attract business, you can make Indiana an appealing place to be by being careful stewards of the people's money and watching over your expenditures and getting value for money. That was my grandfather's mantra. It's been my mantra, and I think I'm pretty sure it's yours as well, and I think it will serve us all well. So thank you again.
Thank you, Dick.
Appreciate it. Would you like to speak? Would you like to say anything?
Well, there was just one or two questions I had. Terry Walker today. When will we actually start paying for this going in? Before
Mr. Walker,
the first time you break ground?
Mr. Walker, can you please state your name and address for the,
Name's Terry Walker, 6505 North, 1000 East.
thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're welcome. When will we actually start paying for this? I mean, as soon as you break ground for it, will we start getting charged our $85 or $100? Or once it's completely in, is that when we start paying for this?
So I think Mike's going to say something here, and so we'll have him answer that question too. Do you have another question too? But
The
we'll
other
get that
thing
answered.
is, I know you've got boundaries on the maps here and there. Once the system is in, the people that are living on those boundaries that did not have a chance to be part of it, will they be able to become part of it
Yes.
to tie in?
From what I understand, you can expand to the district at any point.
Now, will there be any penalties levied on them or anything like that? Or could you maybe, within your policies, go ahead and make any household that's within 1,000 feet of this automatically tie in?
Well, I think what, and you may correct me here, but the plan is proposed such that you would cover the hookup fees for anybody that's in the original district. Anybody who comes in after would have to pay the hookup fees. Did I answer your question or no?
Okay, well, that kind of, sort of, I mean, it depends on if we start paying for this before we can even use it, then people later on come in, they're basically tying in for pennies on the dollar.
Well, they would pay for the infrastructure to get
Well, from their house to it,
but keep in mind, the more
but
people
if
you
we're
have,
paying for all of it,
the more people you have, well, they're paying for all of it too, because they would be paying debt service with their monthly fee, and that's going to help keep your
okay,
operational
now
costs
will
down.
their monthly fee be higher than what the original standard was?
There's a whole lot of factors that would have to be, I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, that's all I had today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think you had some comments.
So I'm Mike Gangstead with Lockmuller Group, and just wanted to clear a couple things up. There's been a lot of information that's been thrown out there on various topics, and first of which is that I think is it Dale? You had said that Lockmuller Group has an incentive to keep the project at a high cost, and we really don't. Our incentive is to provide a project that is going to work, a treatment plant that is going to do what it needs to do. In order to keep costs high, another thoughts that have been thrown out there is that we're producing a very expensive system that's gold plated. And I think that implies that we're doing a system that really we don't care about the cost of it. But really this whole thing from when we started examining this at the very beginning when we did a utility master plan, we looked at many different technologies. First of all, those technologies have to work. That's the first criteria. So we looked at many different technologies to process wastewater. We also looked at the regionalized, localized, and centralized possibilities. So there's a whole number of alternatives that we looked at. The regionalized included sending wastewater to either Delphi or Lafayette. The localized, we looked at various treatment plants for each of the communities on their own. And then the centralized happens to be the one that we're moving toward now, which is one plant for the 3 communities. So we examined all those very carefully and did what's called a life cycle cost analysis that looks at not only the capital cost, but also the operation and maintenance costs for all these. So after examining all of that, it narrows it down to one possibility, which is the most cost effective for all the various alternatives. So that's how we got to the selected alternative that we're at right now. It happens to be the least cost in capital as well as O&M costs. I can't speak to this, Mr. DeLong, about a project in Glenford. Glenford, I think is what you said. Right. So I can't speak to the cost and whether that technology would work in this case, would it not? There's so many factors involved on, what receiving stream is the treated wastewater going to. I'm not sure when this Glenford project was done. 2018, so it's fairly recent. So, okay. And so I just want to assure you that we have looked at the best option that would be for the alternative to treat the waste for these 3 communities.
Okay. Questions or comments? Commission?
Just that, this is part of the process. That's why we didn't launch a project and build a project to begin with. It was to take public input and get it. And I understand that maybe that hasn't gone as smoothly, it sounds like, as everyone would have preferred for it to happen. And that is a fair question. We should audit the work that we've done. And if we find shortcomings, be sure that we address those. We do value the input, and it sounds like we've got some additional work and some additional questions that need to be answered. And we have a meeting scheduled later this month. I look forward to that opportunity to chat further. And I would ask, could I get a photograph of your board before you leave today? Just so I'd like to just have a ready reference. It's a little easier to get to. Thank you. That's all I have, sir.
Okay. So we have 2 resolutions to consider. Sharon, you want to go through those again one more time? I know you mentioned at the beginning of the meeting.
So the 2 resolutions are required for the SRF loan program. The first resolution is the PER acceptance resolution, which is 2021-17. And the second one would be your, who's able to sign off on it? Where's that document?
The signatory authorization resolution.
Signature authorization, which would be the 2021-18 CM.
Okay.
So all we are doing today is, again, approving the resolution that accepts the official engineering report
Right,
from Lockmuir and deciding who is the signatory.
correct.
As
And
we
this
move
has to be
forward.
done before we can apply for SRF funds. We cannot apply for SRF funds until we have the approval from IDEM. And that could take up to 30 days after we had our meeting last week. From my understanding, that's where we stand.
So making sure I understand right. So for us to potentially get federal funds, grants, this, that, everything, to lower the cost of this to the citizens, we need to proceed with this
Correct,
because we've seen the report. We're on to take the next step.
correct.
But
So
these
it's-
would be state funds, but
Right, but still not saying, we're still not being able to tell them, hey, we're 100% go. Because there's still a lot of other steps, a lot of other breaks, a lot of other things that have to be looked at before we can say yes.
Correct.
So,
This is just little check boxes that we have to check off in the procedures that the state have required us to do.
I do have a question. So if at some point in time, and you may not be able to answer this today, but I'd like for somebody to provide me the answer. You're on a train, you've got an emergency brake. I'm going to guess that there are points along this journey that we have the ability to pull that cord and stop the train at some point in time or slow the train down until we get questions answered.
everybody's looking to you.
Yeah, I deferred this to Eric Burns for a reason. So
Okay.
my generalized knowledge, I mean, what you do today, if you don't do this, my understanding is the only thing you stop is the ability to get state revolving funds. So this is a piece you need to get the SRF funds. So this particular stop along the way, it's just whether or not you're going to recommend this engineering to the state for them to potentially give you grant money on. And Mr. DeLong has done more research on this in the last 2 weeks than I have, for sure.
Okay, questions? It,
Can you step back up to the podium?
is it, it's, be brief though, just.
Very much appreciate it. What I would ask Commissioner Brown's question is, does the approval of this prescribe or limit your ability to pursue any other options in the future?
As far as funding, no, this is just in regard to them. I mean, we could still pursue Okra or whoever we'd want to.
If that's Mr. Mason's understanding, then I think that is, I mean, I think you're locked into the engineering for this project as you've developed the district. So, or I don't know, I shouldn't say locked in. The structure of the district is a separate process. So I guess what I'm trying to say is if the district will be structured this way, then that's the type of engineering you're going with. You're asking for funds for. So I guess I don't know the answer to, how you reverse course on the engineering, whether it's at a separate hearing or not. All I know is that this it's not a statutory requirement. It's a state revolving fund requirement is what we're proceeding with today. Which isn't a very satisfactory answer, but. No, I understand that. Given that, I suggest that you defer action on this. Look into establishing an RSD discontinuous. So you would establish an RSD for the little enclave of Colburn with small lots, for the little enclave of Americus with small lots, for the little enclave of Buck Creek with small lots. That addresses the concerns of people with larger lots who already have functioning septic systems. And then I would ask, and this is a suggestion, of course, that you ask your engineers to get with someone else, and I have some people they can talk with, and look at the economics of a small package plant for each of these areas. And then if they take a week or two to do that, then they can come back and you can decide perhaps it's more appropriate to change the RSD, leave the people with large lots out of this and pursue a different alternative. And you have a check on the whole system.
And they did that within the utility master plan.
They did it within the utility master plan without any input from people who do these plants every day. So the people I was
do these
talking to in
plans every day.
Batesville have put 30 of these plants in the ground in the last 29 years. And they are coming up with numbers. Let's go to Stockwell again. Stockwell, I told you, it's built 3 times larger than what it's needed. And it's coming in at $60 a month. So why we got $64 a month is the minimum on this? And Stockwell hasn't increased their fees since 2018. So there are clear examples of plants out there that are getting much closer to our bogey. I don't know why Lockmiller, I've read Lockmiller's report. I don't know why it's not. I can tell you that early on, they proposed using grinders. Grinders increase the effluent in the waste stream dramatically and require a much bigger, yeah.
Okay.
So that would be my suggestion is hold off, ask for additional clarification on how the RSD might be restructured to address one of our concerns, the fairness concern, and then also look at the engineering again with the input from another engineering group.
Okay.
Thank you.
What is the timeline for this in terms of the requirement? Do we have a very short window that we're dealing with to be able to be sure that we're guaranteed an opportunity to apply for these funds, or what is the impact if we delay approving this today?
And I would defer to either one of you because we're applying within that early window, and that window expires when? Well, we've already missed that. Then. May 1st? It's already past May 1st.
We got ours in by April 1st.
Oh, I see. Okay, so this is just this is okay. This process already started.
We're on the list.
Okay.
SRF has us on the list of the proposed project. We have to have all the paperwork. I don't believe they, Dean said when this paperwork had to be done. Time frame wise, we had to wait till after the public release the whole thing and had to advertise it in the newspaper. We did all those correctly. So check out all those boxes. The other boxes.
Okay. Did that answer your question?
Good.
I just have one question, Mike. You might want to answer this, Michael. How many sewage systems do you guys do a year? Regional plants, this,
Many.
that?
We've been doing this for myself for decades. In fact, I've designed plants, and before I designed plants, we were actually, I was in contracting installing them. And there's really no magic way. There's many different technologies, but there's a certain threshold that how do you want to describe this? There's no magic way to make a really cheap treatment plant that will work. Okay, we've looked at various technologies. I've said recirculating media filters, package plants, lagoon type systems, others. We looked at land application discharge, direct discharge to the creek, et cetera. We looked at all these, and we have absolutely found the best alternative to do this as far as cost. See, what you have to really consider is not only the capital cost. It may be a very inexpensive treatment plant, but you have to look at the O&M cost and replacement cost of the future. You don't want something that in 10 years you're going to have to replace the whole thing. There's been many small little package plants of the cheaper variety that IDEM is going back on and forcing these communities to put a different plant in. I know a couple down now toward the Ohio River area where IDEM is having to go back and force these communities to put in treatment plants that actually work because they fail. You have to have a treatment plant that will work and last for 20, 30 years. And that's what we've figured in all of our alternatives. We didn't look at these other alternatives where they're very questionable and they have a high potential for failure. So I would think that the communities would want, if we're paying money for a lot of these projects, you want something that's going to work and it's going to last. So does that answer your question?
Yep, thank you.
Hang
Hang on.
Plan for the plant, part of the exact same technology as the Lockmiller come up with.
Do you?
An SPR.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I don't have any others.
Do we have a motion?
Mr. President, I'll move that we approve resolution 2021-17-CM. This is the SRF loan program and it's per acceptance resolution.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the acceptance resolution for the PER. Any further discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes.
Then, Mr. President, I'll move that we approve resolution 2021-18-CM. This is the signatory authorization resolution. And this therefore allows President Murtaugh to sign accordingly.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and a second for resolution 2021-18-CM. Any further discussion on that?
No,
Hearing
sir.
none, all in favor, say aye.
I
Okay, Sharon, is there any other business?
No.
Okay,
move to adjourn.
okay, we're adjourned.